Hi, good morning, everyone. And of course, welcome to our People Analytics Masterclass, day one. All right. Hey, Rika, what's up? Just giving everybody a shout to drop something on the chat. Let me know that you're here, that you're ready to roll. Hey, Natasha, how you doing? Hi, Lynette. Y'all not tired of me yet? Hey, Tamika. All right, good. All right, so when we had our workshop and stuff like that, of course, the environment doesn't accommodate a lot of real time interaction. So what we're thinking of doing is pulling those on stage. So of course you'll have your camera could be on, your mic could be on. Of course, muting them will keep you on the backdrop until you need to say something. And of course, I want these sessions to be very interactive because we are working together. Hopefully, you all got the files that I shared, the Excel file, the Word document, right? Because I want this to be very as hands-on as possible. I want you all to work with me and basically want you all to shadow what I'm doing and try to understand the process as much as possible. Yeah. So you're cool with that coming on stage? We'll see. I'll let Francis try to get you guys on, right? Because I really want this to be as interactive as possible. Yeah. I want it to be like we're virtually at a table in a workspace. I'm sharing my stuff on the screen and you're all working on your laptops and stuff like that. So it'll be great to have this as as interactive as possible. Yeah. All right. No, no. Sorry. I converted our document to a PDF for the with the functions and stuff like that, right, Natasha? Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, my bad. There we go. Hey, Tamika, how are you? Tamika, I swear you in a cockpit there, flying a plane.
Let me try and see if I can get some more lights in.
All right. Let me see if I could pull anyone. Yeah. I'm unable to pull people onto the stage.
I was invited, so I accepted.
Yeah. Yeah. Good. Yeah, guys, don't be shy. Hey, Natasha, how are you?
I'm good, Kerron.
All right.
Trying to fix the camera.
Okay. No problem, deal. Let me share my screen in the meantime.
I seems to be giving trouble.
Morning, everyone. I'm just explaining that I'm trying to bring folks up. So I just I'm sending you individual invitations, but I can only send them one at a time.
Okay.
So I have to wait until someone responds before it moves on to the next person. So I'm kind of lagging, kind of waiting. I imagine folks are fixing up, saying I didn't get to come on any camera this morning.
Well,
You
you
know?
can turn off your camera and your mic if you wish. Of course, the mic would be the more important one for me, because I would love for you all to come on when I ask my questions when we're having our discussion, to be able to join the discussion. I think it's gonna be much more effective than just the chat. Yeah, but the chat is also an effective tool as well. All right, let's see. Hey, Padmini, how are you? Hey, Rika.
Hi, you hear me?
No hiding. No hiding today.
Tamika and I had a discussion. I shall be hiding this morning.
It's not a problem. It's great to hear you all, because I
Yeah,
think a huge part of this is tying back towards having the discussions, and if we aren't able to really have that in-depth discussion, it does take away a lot from what we could really accomplish today. So
for sure.
All right,
yeah.
everybody's on stage,
Perfect.
and what we have control over is how the screen looks.
Mhm.
So the person talking can be highlighted. I'm going to turn myself, or actually start talking, Kerron. Let me make sure that you pop in.
Yes, I'm hoping that I pop in. There we go.
So it could be, do you prefer this layout or this layout?
um I think this one is fine because I don't want to impose on the screen itself. Yeah.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna go into the background again.
All right. And of course, what could help is hopefully you'll see the screen. You can maximize the screen, right? You
Yeah.
should be able to maximize the screen if you want to. And if you maximize the screen,
Yes.
yeah. So if you maximize it, you wouldn't see me popping up on the side all the time. And of course, when we start doing the work, it's easier for you to focus on what we're doing. Yeah. Just good.
That might be a little small though, Kerron. They
Yeah. This
oh
one, the screen is very small.
oh I'm seeing what you're saying. Maximizing
Yeah. Just maximize the screen that's being shared.
the
So
screen share. Okay.
yeah,
So folks, to maximize the screen share, you have to hover over
over the yeah.
the slide, and you'll see a double arrow in the top right hand corner. I didn't know you could do this. It maximizes to fill up the screen, and then you don't see Kerron, which is that'll be the downfall. You don't get to see the man, but it does
I'm
blow up.
I'm cool with that. I didn't see Leonard though. I didn't see Leonard come on.
Yeah, she's there.
Oh, she's there. All right, cool. Hi, Leonard. How are you? All right. All right. Nice. Okay, no problem, Palmini. Hopefully, you'll be back to 100% soon. We'll do the analytics on your progress, right? We'll do a prediction on when you'll be back to 100%.
Yeah, Kerron.
All right. So let's kick off. Listen, the hardest thing with this topic area is because there's so many things to talk about. How do I compact all of this into an effective day? And because we could go on and on with this topic, and there's so many things that we could do, but I decided to just simplify things.
On my way to your way.
Make it a bit, I think guys, maybe y'all could just mute your mics, unless you want to contribute to the discussion. And you could always jump on your mic, unmute your mic. You could always stop me at any time, say, hey, Kerron, have a question, and stuff like that. But in the meantime, you could just be muted, so it'll be a bit easier. So we're not going to get some of the background noises, etc. All right. So yeah, there's so many things to talk about with people analytics. And of course, today's session, we will be focusing on a few items. And of course, you all got the agenda where we talk about the mindset mastery. How do we adopt that mindset? And of course, data is involved in it. But I'm going to walk you all through that roadmap that we had spoken about initially in our workshops. We are going to revisit that today, but I am going to add a little more detail to it. All right, we're going to delve into it in a little more detail in terms of, I want you all to get into my mindset in terms of how I think about people analytics, how I apply it. And I also have a little analogy in terms of how I think holistically about the workforce. All right, so hopefully that will that will add some more insight for you all to help you all make your own progress and even come up with your own stories and your own analogies in terms of how you think about people analytics. All right. We are gonna do some metric work. We're gonna do some analysis of the Excel data that I shared with you all. So that Excel file, that's this flavor craft file. So I for those of you all who has a copy of this file from our workshop, it's a bit different. I did some more work. I added more fields. We have some demographics. We have some other things in the mix here. So there's quite a number of other data attributes in that collection, which I think you might like exploring. All right. So we will do some calculations on it as well. We're gonna do some analysis. We're gonna work on some metrics, and our work today will revolve around diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not a popular topic in the region now, but it is something that we have been kind of subtly hinting at for the longest while, especially like women in leadership, the pay gap, pay equity, and all these things. So the discussions have been around. So we are gonna look at some of those metrics and do some calculations there. All right. We will continue that into past the lunch period, and we're gonna have a short space where I'll talk to you all about how do we convert what we found in our analysis into visualization, right? How to actually not develop it really, because developing an HR visualization or any kind of data viz is pretty easy, right? It's just drag and drop in Power BI. But how do we customize it to really make it effective? So I'm more focused on rendering and creating a very effective presentation in terms of how do we visualize it in an effective manner so that our audience could capture or grasp the message we are trying to share with them, right? So this is basically the three major points. Mindset mastery, we're going to look at how to transform your mindset, how to think about people analytics, how to work with data, right? So that's your data prowess. You're going to work on how to understand data a little more, think about data in a different way, and be able to work with it in Excel, using some of those functions that you all probably were like, oh gosh, why Kerron giving me a headache? Why is Kerron giving me all this stress in this workshop when we were doing our VLOOKUPs and some of the other items? So I'm going to walk you all through some of those functions because I want you all to be able to master those functions. Because no matter how your HR data is, those functions are the key ones you'll need to know and be able to apply with your data so that you could really prepare your data and analyze your data to get that meaning from it. All right. So it's pretty important to do that. So this is our plan today. And let me just kind of jump in. And of course, you all are familiar with Flavorcraft. You are hired as an analytics professional at Flavorcraft, and you really want to, the organization is now pushing for its HR professionals to look at data in a way that they've never done before. All right. So we know what the company is all about. It is manufacturing. So they have quite a number of departments and divisions, but we are new to the organization and we are diving into the data, and there are going to be scenarios and situations in the company that we will have to deal with. And we're going to have to provide that data insight to those decision makers to help them make the best strategic decisions or operational decisions possible for the workforce. All right. Now, the people analytics mindset. Guys, don't worry, I don't have a lot of slides today. Today, I want us to do a lot of hands-on work. So you're going to be working alongside me, and that's where the time will fly, right? They only like maybe 25 slides overall for the entire day. So we're going to be doing a lot of hands-on work. Yeah? Nice. So the people analytics mindset is really shifting yourself from just thinking about the workforce as, a bunch of individuals. We're doing things, we're trying to solve problems, yes, but we have to think about it from a more holistic perspective, right? It's all about, yes, we are in different areas. So like, let's say, we're looking at, let's say, talent management, for instance. So you have talent management, that's an area within HR. There are a lot of processes within talent management, but we have to think about what's the impact of that on other areas of the company. How does talent management contribute towards the holistic HR experience as well as the employee experience? So when you're thinking about people analytics, it's all about how do we gather all the data, what's happening in these other areas to be able to understand what's happening with us, right? So it's really looking at a data-driven approach. We aren't working with, what we think or what we feel, right? We're looking at evidence here, right? It's all about evidence-based management and evidence-based decision making. So that's what the mindset is all about. And I think my favorite slide is this one. So I want you all, I want us to have a discussion around this. This is my little analogy with regard to how I think about the workforce. And it's this mindset that actually had me thinking about analytics way before people were talking about it as HR analytics, people analytics, and all these things, right? I was crunching numbers around the workforce because in 2006 or 2007, somewhere around there, I had a conversation with a senior HR professional, and we were actually making this, we made this analogy happen because we were talking about it from a fluid point of view. And it's always stuck with me. And this is how do you all think about the workforce? Is it this puddle, like what I'm looking at, that is fluid, it's constantly changing, right? It's like, or maybe we should look at it from a Trinidad perspective. It's a pothole in the road. Yeah, a pothole full with water, right? So it's fluid, it's constantly changing. We have people coming in. Good potholes there too. All right. I don't think they're as big as Trinidad's though, right? In Trinidad, we could hang out and have a river lime by the pool in the road. Yeah. So we have new people coming in. So basically, I have water trickling in to this puddle, and as you wow, and as you thanks Amika, and as as things happen, the wind blowing, water will come out, so people will leave the organization. So you have a constant stream, basically. Wow, that's not a pothole deal, that's a parking spot, right? That's basement parking. Yeah. so we think about this puddle of water, and even when water comes in, it moves around, right? Water doesn't stay in one space. So within your organization, you have employees coming in, and employees they'll get internally promoted, they'll have some lateral move, or at some point they're going to leave the organization. So it's a constant flow of employees throughout, right? And that's what your organization is. The organization is a collection of people, right? The professionals. So as a people analytics professional, we have to keep track of what's happening. Our role is, because so many things are happening, there's so many moving parts, we have to keep track of everything that's going on, collect enough data, because we are not directly involved in a lot of these things, but the data does provide the evidence so that we know what's going on. So our role is really to gather that data of all these moving parts and try to make sense of them. Try to pull them together, see the patterns, see the trends, see what's happening, and determine, share that information with the decision makers, who will determine whether or not, hey, this is good, excellent stuff going on here, or this is something that we need to take some corrective action on. All right. So it's really about understanding how the forces that impact our workforce occur, and how do we respond to or mitigate those forces that are pushing and molding, this puddle of water that is our workforce around, right? So I think if you start thinking about the workforce like this, y'all ever thought about the workforce like this? Or y'all know, okay, yeah, it's always moving because headcount changing, people coming, people going. It's a whole flurry of movement, right? Did y'all ever think of it like water? And this is pretty much not the fluidity. Yeah. Yeah. So this is how I have thought about the workforce from ever since. So like 15, 16 years ago. And it has actually helped me a lot in how I think about approaching people analytics, like approaching the data, like start thinking about how does this section, so let's say this section over here, let's say this section is, all our new recruits coming in, and, we have people coming in and we have people getting trained over here. And we have those, with their performance systems being appraised over here. And we have promotions happening over here. So how do employees move across that whole employee life cycle? And of course, they come back and forth, right? Because we have employees who at some point they might be star performers, and then later the manager changes, and that changes the whole paradigm of things, right? So you change a manager, you start slipping a bit, you become a normal, regular kind of worker, you're not a star performer anymore. And, we go through these waves, right? And all employees will go through that, or even groups of employees. So as a people analytics professional, we have to think about it from a group perspective. It's not just individual, but we do look at individuals, but we have to think about the collective. And with the collective, that's where you get into that managerial mindset. How do we manage what's going on here? And getting the data to provide the evidence to say, hey, this is actually what's going on. This is the trend or pattern that we're seeing. And do we want that to continue? Or do we want to curb it and maybe shift it out from here? And then that's the data we provide and the insight we provide to those who have to make the decisions, right? And in this way, they make the decisions, and of course, we have to keep monitoring. So it's a constant work, right? We don't ever stop. There's nothing where you say, oh, we fix this problem and we go on. No, we have to monitor the issue, keep looking at it, see if it's improving, see if whatever initiatives we put in place is actually going to improve it or make some kind of impact on it. Sometimes we make it worse, right? So we have to monitor it to determine, okay, how are we responding to it, and whether or not that response is on point, whether or not that response could actually aid us towards, bearing a solution for that particular problem there, right? So it doesn't ever stop. Whatever analysis you do now, whatever model we build, like even during this class, it's something that you will constantly be reviewing, you will constantly be evolving and adjusting and looking at things in a different way. So this is why, like, that same FlavorCraft file, you may have thought, okay, we worked with that, and if we bring that back here, we'll have the same data. But it's not really like that, because data changes, the workforce will change, and the data that we need to look at could also change, right? So that's just my thoughts on it. All right. Hopefully you all got some insight on this here, but this is how I think. So when you hear me talking about things in a particular way, or I'm seeing a connection, I am thinking about this puddle, and that's how I kind of see everything. And I probably have little spots in between with every stage of the employee life cycle, right? So from coming in, the onboarding process, to the exit process, I do the exit interviews and all these things, to performance, to promotions, movements, and all these other things right inside of it, right? Even disciplinary and all these things have an impact on the puddle itself, on the workforce itself, right? Because you think about the other factor that I didn't add into this so far is that you have depth to the puddle, right? You have depth. There's certain parts that will be deeper. You have shallower parts and all these things. That's tying back to levels of performance, levels of engagement, and all these types of things. So you start thinking about it like that. You start seeing how everything is connected. So there's no part of HR, there's no part of how an organization works that operates in isolation. So when you start thinking about how all these parts connect, it makes this whole thing much different. If you didn't think about it before, it makes how you think about the data collection and how you think about analyzing the data in a much different way, right? How you approach it. Cool? Yeah, don't worry, guys. I'm going to let you all into my head a lot today, because I want you all to adopt these practices, adopt these thoughts, and, mold it in your way, right? Customize it. I would love for somebody to take like this idea I have and come back to me 3 months later and say, hey, Kerron, I really thought about this fluidity concept. And, I think you could add this state, or, I kind of added this state because of my experience. And I would love to hear that, because we aren't, I don't measure things like, who's better than who and who's more an expert in whatever. I think that we are all different. My approach is different. Your approach is different. That doesn't make it better or worse, but it just makes it, it just makes it unique. All right. And there's no greater value or lesser value here. All right. So yeah, take it, run with it. If you want to add something to it, we good to go. I would love to hear how you all think about this, and maybe your own ideas on how you think about the workforce. Yeah. So this is what we looked at in our workshop, right? Our last session, when we had a discussion on, understanding how to approach, HR from a data-driven perspective, how to look at things in this kind of fashion where there is a roadmap that you'll have to follow to get to the point where we are analyzing data and getting the insights that we need, right? So anything that we have to do within HR, just like HR strategy depends heavily and supports business strategy, right? So in the same way, we're not just gonna jump in and start analyzing employee data or people data and for any other purpose than supporting the business, right? So the first thing we always have to do is look at the business goals. What do we aim to achieve? What is the business issue that we're trying to solve? If you're just going in and exploring HR data, that's fine, even if you find trends and patterns. But I used to do that in the early days, just to see what's going on, to gain some familiarity. But if there's no real business issue here, that if we solve it, it's not really going to add value to the business, we might see a pattern, but we're not going to just run to senior management and say, hey, we've seen this pattern, and they'll be like, well, what's the issue here, or what are we trying to solve, or how can solving that problem impact the business, right? So we always have to pull it back to the business. What is the business trying to achieve? How can we add value to the business? So the business goal will always drive it, even if you are exploring the data first, or if the business issue came to you and you have to now delve into the data. Either way, there will always be a point where you have to think about how is this problem impacting the business, and how is solving this problem gonna promote business opportunities or strategic opportunities for the business. All right. And of course, after we do that, we think about, okay, what data do we need? If we have to solve this problem, in order to get the evidence that will prove that there is a problem or the details of the problem, we have to get the data. All right. And when we think about what data do we need, we start asking ourselves, who's going to give it? Where are we going to get it from? So data is heavily involved in this process. If you have no data, we can't perform any analytics, all right? And then, of course, having the data is one thing. How are we going to analyze? How are we going to break this down? How are we going to be able to present this? So technology will have to get involved here. We have certain tools that we're going to use. Like in our case, I'm looking at Excel, which is tied back to starting small, right? There's no need to invest heavy money into specialized HRIS tools, specialized analytics tools, when you have an expert system right on your desktop, right? So Excel is usually a starting point for any kind of analysis, and then we step it up into things like Power BI, and then you could go into more expert systems, such as like in HRIS systems, you'll have like PeopleSoft and SAP. In ADP, they all have analytics modules that you pay for. Vizier is also one. They do some of the heavy number crunching, and you could get a lot of that insight straight from your HRIS without actually doing it manually. But of course, it comes at a cost to the organization. So you start small, you prove the value with Excel, you show Power BI, you share, visualize the data using that, and be able to show value for the function. And once there's business value to be had from the function, you step it up, right? The business will be able to invest into higher level tools and all these things. But the tools really is part of that roadmap, right? So let me just add in now how we delve into this process, right? So for each one of these steps, I have now just kind of delved into it a little more, sharing a little more detail, fleshing it out a little more. I want you all to be able to follow, ask these questions. You may ask it in your way, but it's really all about understanding how do we get from there is a problem in the organization, it's related to people, somebody trying to solve a problem, but how do we go from that statement where somebody's asking HR, hey, can you make recommendations on this and that and the other, right? How do you go from that problem being highlighted to providing the evidence and providing this narrative that will help those who have to make the decisions, move forward and actually make the right decision, all right? So first, we think about the business goals. This is very, very important, right? What are we aiming to achieve? What are the business outcomes we're trying to do? And look at the important part here. How do these goals align to business strategy? You might think, just capturing data and looking at, let's say, the onboarding process and engagement in the onboarding process, that doesn't really add too much to strategy, if you just focus on the process itself. But big picture here, workforce here, if people come in and they're more satisfied at the beginning of their employment journey with your company, chances are they are going to perform better. Now, that's a hypothesis, right? But we need to get the evidence too. So we're saying that if we do this onboarding process with these people, there's a chance that they're going to improve, it's going to improve overall performance in the company. Then we collect data there at the onboarding with their feedback and how they felt about it and how they feel, what's their satisfaction level with the process. And then we look at the data now at the 6-month point when they hit probation, when they end in probation, etc. what was the feedback, what was the appraisal like, how are they performing, and what's their potential. So we start seeing now where certain patterns could come up. So we have to look at gathering data at certain points of the employee life cycle, right? And that is where you will see where the goals of, you know, conducting this study for onboarding, for instance, how is that going to add strategic value to the business? So you realize I mentioned something here, right? I didn't put it on the slide, but it's all about formulating your hypothesis, right? Coming up with your assumption, because we are HR people, right? The HR domain has a lot of theories and concepts, right? So we know where are my T and D people here? Who are my core train and development people in the room? Who's involved in a lot of T&D? And there are a lot of concepts and theories tied to HR there, where they talk about, listen, you train people up, you give them the right skills, they're going to perform better. Isn't that a hypothesis? That's a concept. But you have to prove that concept with your company, right? How many of you all, there was a lot of training spent last budget period on training. Did that actually improve performance? If somebody asks you, can you tell me a clear yes, no, maybe? Leonard? Not really, right? And the thing is, where's the evidence? So can you show me evidence that the training, there we go. It is an important question, right? So what has the impact been on all the training spend that we've had in the company over the last year? Yeah. Tamika, what do you think? You want to jump on the mic? I know that you're involved in some training and stuff too.
I do believe that it's very important to have it in mind, because without it, I have seen where, as you said, if the onboarding session is impacted negatively for some reason or the other, somehow that cohort of persons who you have onboarded, they feel lost. For example, during COVID, one day everything was streamlined for the orientation to happen.
Right.
But then there was a disconnect, because whereas they proposed a particular day for onboarding, they had arranged another meeting with another set of workers. And so when those persons came on, regrettably, their heads of department were in the meeting.
Oh,
So
wow.
I just don't understand how that level of disconnect could have happened when the proposed date for onboarding was that date. And you knew, because you were the one who asked for it to be on that date.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that cohort felt lost in the beginning. And some would have exited already. Some are there. So you have good stories, because we do have one that has really shone brightly, but that's the exception.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And thanks for sharing, Tamika. And that's the thing. We have with all employees, you have the S curve, right? With any kind of human interaction, there's that S curve where you are always gonna find the top performers, no matter what the environment brings, right? They will always have the top performers. You'll always have those, even if you have all the resources in place, you're gonna have those who still need that pushing, who still aren't gonna perform at that peak. They're still gonna be at the lower levels of that S curve, and then you have the average in between. So no matter what we do, we are trying to ensure that we put everything in place so that we have that level of control over the outcome as much as possible, right? Because think about this. This is an HR thing too, right? This is industrial relations here I'm going to talk about too. You cannot terminate an employee for non-performance unless you as an organization first has proven that you did everything in your power to help them, to provide whatever they need to perform. You see? So if it is we have to do that, we have to ensure we gather data to prove that we did what we had to do and to prove that they're still not performing. How many people you all know in organizations right now should be terminated for non-performance but can't because there's no evidence, right? So evidence needs to be gathered, data needs to be gathered. And when we talk about strategy here, guys, what you have to think about with the data that you have, right? What you have to think about with the data is time. Time is an important factor when we are collecting data. if we are looking at this workforce, and this workforce is, oh gosh, we, right? Dale, why are you so harsh? But I think it's more than half though. Just FYI, right? But time, anytime we think about strategy, etc., we are thinking about the concept of time. So if I'm looking, let's say that onboard example we just used, right? Or the diversity stuff we're gonna look at today. We have to look at it. If right now we get in this snapshot as at today's date, right? We have to look at it, whether we are hitting the benchmark, whether we're below or above. What we have to do is look at the time factor. So over a period of time, has it improved, right? Has it been improving? And of course, we're going to continuously monitor it for the next 3 months, 6 months, and look at whether or not it's remained the same, whether it's improving or not, because it all represents, data represents behavior. Data represents decision making. So are the decisions being made after we tell the organization, listen, we probably not do have enough equity here, right? We below the baseline or the benchmark that's out there. Are the decisions being made? Is the behavior changing that will show a change in the pattern, right? So all data represents behavior. All data represents decisions being made, the outcomes of certain decisions that the decision makers, senior management make, right? So what business issues are we solving? It's all about thinking about the issues. We don't just do analytics because we like it, right? We do it because we are trying to solve problems. We are trying to get the evidence to help us justify the decisions that we are making. And those decisions are the problem-solving decisions. Those are the solutions that we're looking for. So it's very important to think about how is the data really supporting what we are trying to push out here in terms of, do we have the evidence? And it's not necessarily what we like or don't like. Sometimes we analyze data and the patterns we see we don't like, or it's not supportive of what we're trying to recommend. But that doesn't mean we have to change the data in any way. All right, data is data. We have to trust it. And sharing what it is, even though we still can make our recommendations, we have to be mindful that we don't want to skew that analysis in any way. We want to be as open and real as possible. Yeah. So now that we've understood, okay, we're trying to achieve this, we're trying to solve these problems, let's get the data. Let's look for the evidence. Do we have the evidence? All right. So what data elements do we need to perform this? So, like, let's say generally, demographics work wonders, right? Having that core stuff within your HRIS, your employee data, that is such an important area. Your HRIS should be, yeah, for sure, Natasha. But the main thing is, Natasha, and what I've learned over the years is that have that paper trail. Send the emails to the people, send the evidence and everything. Have that paper trail to cover yourself. Because at the end of it, you know very well, Natasha, and I've been involved in some of these things as well, where later down the road, it hits the fan, right? Things hit the fan, and people come back now and say, so what went on here? Why I didn't do this? Why, what the analysts had to say about that? And I'll tell them, hey, 3 months ago, I sent an email here. Look, I'll forward it to you. I sent an email. I sounded like our partner in the general meeting, right? I sound like our partner in general meeting, right? And saying, hey, I sent an email to board members, CEO a couple months ago, and nobody responded. Yeah. Email CYA, cover your anatomy. Yeah, for sure. So ensure that when you find stuff, you push it out. Show the decision makers what you've come across. The decision makers have to make the decision, not you. That's the one thing that we have to understand too. As a people analytics professional, we are looking at HR data, we're getting the patterns, we're seeing, getting the insights. We don't make the decisions, we make recommendations. So we forward that to the decision makers with the recommendations. It's up to them to do whatever they want with it. Ideally, we want them to action, right? But not everybody sees the workforce like the fluidity, that fluid element that I looked at earlier, right? Not everyone looks at it like that. And of course, correct, just send it. That was your role and responsibility, right, Natasha? It's your role and responsibility. You did what you have to do. If the organization doesn't make a decision, we have to live with it, right? And that's the reality, all right? So getting your employee data, compensation data, training, basically data that has all the touch points across the employee lifecycle. It's very important to do that. And then, of course, understanding some of your workforce metrics, right? Headcount is a basic one, performance, compensation, training hours, the basic stuff, right? Even the onboarding data, right? And there's one thing I've been promoting a lot, like especially with the recruitment side of things. Had a discussion recently where I work with the recruitment team, and we want to start. I wanted them to start capturing who the recruitment panel was for certain recruits, right? For all recruits, basically, because what we want to do is tie it back to like what scores they gave these people within the interview process, and look back and see how accurate these guys were in terms of identifying talent, right? And for those who aren't that good, we train them up. We build our cadre of recruitment panelists, so that when we have to get a certain type of employee, we're looking for critical roles, we know who we need to tap into to really be able to identify, to improve the chances of, right? Because there's no guarantees, but to improve the chances of, capturing better. Yeah. Yeah. You need to look at the hiring personnel too, right? Not just the candidate. You have to look at those who are hiring, because sometimes they you put people in positions that hire people, but then the person who gets hired is not the right fit. They're not performing well. Maybe they look like the right fit, but maybe the panelists did not identify, some of those subtle behavioral aspects and personality traits that would not have made that person a good fit for the role. So capturing data on the panelists themselves and what they provided as part of the recruitment process is essential to help us understand the decisions that were made there, to help us also identify their gaps and we want to improve it. All right. Of course, all of these things take time. They take effort. You have to adjust your process. Somebody needs to be plugging in that data somewhere. But they said, what I always tell people too, if we start in small, we start thinking about, hey, we have so much data from the last year, 2 years to enter. Oh gosh, how are we gonna start, right? My advice has always been start now. Just start now, moving forward. Let's start capturing now and move forward. Integrate it as part of your process and move forward. And then when we start seeing the value after 1 month, 2 months, 3 months of data, then we now justify the need for getting a little project done where people could enter the backlog for, like, let's say the last year of recruitment. You see? So we now justify it. You always prove and then get support. You don't look for the support up front where you have none to, where you haven't proven anything. Prove it first, prove that there's value, and then you're gonna get the support to do something on a larger scale. Yeah. So when we understand what data we need, so we understand what attributes we're looking for and what we need to get, the next question we have now would be, okay, if we're looking for demographic data, where we're going to get at, right? It's going to be our HRS, right? Maybe we're looking at employee performance. So employee performance is not just based on how they do the job, right? It's based, remember, we look at performance along, or talent along, two lines. We look at talent as performance itself in terms of meeting your deliverables, meeting and exceeding, those objectives. But we also have to think about potential. Potential is a slightly harder area to measure, but it's tied back towards, 360 feedback. It's tied back towards their general attitude and disposition towards the job, their openness towards learning, and you think about the holistic person. So potential has more to do with personality than capability. Performance is capability, and potential is their personality. When you combine the two, that's how you get talent. Because think about it, guys. I think I'm trying to remember where I saw that. It was a really interesting way in which they looked at talent. And we tend to think about, okay, we want to get the high performers. But a high performer may not necessarily be a high potential. Yeah? A high performer will be somebody very focused, doing the job, really good, expert at what the job is. But they may not be the kind of person who willing to mentor and pull a team with them. They don't have that kind of potential. And they don't have that potential to excel at a higher level role. You see? So I'll throw a and the same way, the other way around, right? We might have people who have high potential, like, they're real willing to learn, they're real, enthusiastic, they're engaged, they're jumping in, they want to do stuff, but they're not performing. They just can't follow through. They can't get the job done, but they are enthusiastic. We feel optimistic. Yeah, man, they're looking good. They look like they have the right attitude, but they don't necessarily get the job done, right? They're probably not detail oriented enough. They're just kind of jumping in, energetic, but they miss out a lot of parts along the way. They haphazard in what they do. So we have that other side of it. So what has always been one of the better areas for talent is not just looking at top talent like the stars or whatever the case is, but we looking at those in between. They may not have the highest level of performance, and they also may not have the highest level of potential, but these are the guys who are easily molded into a higher role rather than those with the extremities in one. Right? So it's very interesting when you look at people. As I say, the way to separate it is performance is about capability and potential is about personality. And when you bring both together and you have the right balance of both, that's when you could really get somebody who's a potential star performer. Right? So it's really interesting. I've looked at a lot of employee data. I've pushed people to get that data so that we could prove it, and it actually has been proven in a couple of occasions, right? So when you think about where you get the data, you have to, if it is you are not collecting that data right now, you have to start now, right? Don't start worrying, oh gosh, what are we going to do? We don't have nothing. Well, if it is you realize that there's a need for that data, so like with my last slide, where I say, okay, we realize we need this data, and then you ask yourself, okay, where are we gonna get it? We don't have it, right? But if we don't have it, we start collecting. We start collecting it now. And then the next question might be, okay, well, it's probably not for us to collect. It's not HR related data that's sitting in HR. Who do we need to talk to get this data? Even if it's somebody directly in HR. So we might need to talk to a recruitment manager. We might need to talk to the talent manager. We might need to talk to the operations manager within HR ops, right? So who do we need to talk to about this? Or who do we need to talk to get access to it? So IT might get involved, marketing might be there. We need to get data like that, right? Like if I'm looking at employee engagement data for a front-facing department, right? Let's say customer service, for instance. I need to talk to the customer service team. Their manager might have data there. I'm also going to have to talk to the marketing team who are pushing out the NPS surveys, customer satisfaction. I need to see those surveys, right? People might consider it HR data, but we need it for HR analysis because the decisions that your staff makes on the front end impact how customers respond with the satisfaction survey. So that's important data. That's the output and the outcome of the service that they're providing. So we just doing people analytics research is not just about HR data. I think I mentioned this before, that business data is people data, because what goes into the business and how the business outcomes are is based on what people did, right? So all business data is actually people data. You start thinking about it like that, there's no separation, right? The only question now is, where do we need to go and get it? Who do we need to talk to, right? And just make it happen. And once you could justify the rationale for it, I'm sure you're going to get the support and they're going to share it. Even if they share it, in a limited space, limited amounts, that's fine. Better have some than none, right? Because it adds those extra dimensions to your analysis, right? So where are we going to get it? It's either internal or external. In HR, outside of HR, outside of the business, outside in the industry, you could get our data as well. And who's going to give it to us, right? Internal units, or sometimes you could reach out to the regulators, right? So let's say like with telecommunications, you have the telecommunications authority who would have data on the industry, who might have other market research data that you can reach out to them and ask, hey, I want to do this for our company. We want to benchmark something. You reach out to the authorities on it, right? Or the associations. So like you have HERMAT, you have HERMAB, HERMAJ. These guys might have HR data across companies, across industries that may be useful for you as well when you are doing your own research, right? And compiling your data. Yeah. And then, of course, the last step in the process is tied to the technology tools. What tools are we going to use, right? We have Anybody here using Tableau? where you all work? You all have Tableau as part of your setup and the environment? I know it's a kind of toss up, no? It's a toss up between Tableau and Power BI, right? They're both basically the same, you know, right? They're both basically the same. There's some slight differences because of course they're different vendors. So I guess a lot of you all would end up in Power BI simply because it's tied to the Microsoft environment, right? It's a Microsoft application. It's not part of the Office suite or anything, but we are fairly familiar with Microsoft, and of course it's free. Tableau actually does so Power BI desktop is free, right? Power BI desktop is free. The services and stuff like that, you have to pay for licensing, but the licensing isn't that expensive, you know, guys. You could easily justify, you know, licenses for maybe a small group or yourself as the analyst. It's like 10 US per month, right? So that's literally like no money. That's like 1 day lunch, right? Buying lunch for 1 day, you could get your Power BI license for the month. Yeah. So an organization should have no issues in terms of giving you all, you know, a couple licenses for Power BI desktop pro version, where you can actually share your dashboards and allow users to interact with them real time, you know. And that's where the power of dashboarding comes in, because you can build something that somebody can interact with and filter however they want to and get the insights that they are looking for. So I build dashboards differently based on whether or not it's something I just have to toss in a PowerPoint and share as a static dashboard, versus something that you could build within Power BI that allows your viewers to interact with it and filter it down and play with the categories and drill down and all these things, right? So there are different ways in which you can share that information. I think I did it. I did some of that as well. Rika, remember? You remember with that survey we did? The worksheet I did for the different divisional heads,
Yeah.
right? Where we allow them to play around with their own data and um view satisfaction levels for different areas and how they compare to the overall division. How HR did, Rika?
We have a lot of work to go to do.
Well, we have the evidence, right?
We do.
Yeah, right. And of course, you have basic tools like Excel. And I always say, listen, we already have Excel. Excel is so powerful, and it's getting more and more powerful every iteration. Like today, I'm gonna show you all. Anybody ever working with data models in Excel? Never work in data models? We're gonna work on that today. I'm gonna show you all how Excel actually pulls all your data together in a decent data model. And I'll also show you all how it works in Power BI, because Power BI and Excel actually use the same tool to really kind of work with data models. So I think there's a point where you will get an error within Excel itself, because Excel has limitations too, right? But you'll get to work in Power BI with the same data model. So I just to give you all a heads up, you know, this is how you think about data, but also how you could work with data, right? Using the applications that I highlighted here, right? Of course, you have to also ask yourself, we have these basic tools that we're using, but are there any other technologies that we could use with the company? So your HRIS system, most of them now has an analytics component. If it's not built into the application, it's usually like an external, like an extension or an additional module that your company may have to pay for. But I'll tell you, after you prove any value with these internal tools, you could really justify pushing to pay the extra to have those add-ons with your HRIS. Or sometimes the specialized software like Vizier or Cruncher. All right, I'll throw those in the chat. Right, you can check them out. These are actually some really good tools that specialize in analytics, right? So Vizier actually allows you to store your data too. It works basically like a specialized HRIS, and it's focused on analytics. So if anyone of you all remember, you know, some of those webinars we did recently, Ian Cook, he's actually VP of People Analytics for Vizier, right? And VCI said it's a magical tool. Of course, it's pricey because it's specialized. But if your organization, if you prove the value of people analytics and those initiatives with your own local tools here, you can certainly justify at some point in time, be able to justify the spend for specialized tools like these. Yeah, nice. So let's look at Flavorcraft, right? And as I was mentioning earlier, workforce diversity is something that has been popping up, not as diversity, because we have been focusing on diversity more along the lines of gender. You all do realize that? Yeah? Oh, Rika, that's the drive folder that I shared. Yeah, yeah. All right, cool. Thanks. Yeah, Ian Cook, real cool guy. Um, I follow his stuff too, and they're doing so many amazing things, right? But yeah, Ian is really cool. You could always follow him, and you'll see all the stuff that they get involved in. And another name that you should follow, like on LinkedIn, is David Green if you haven't already, right? David Green, and I'm trying to remember the other guy's name. He's tied to Insight 222. They actually wrote the book on excellence in people analytics. They have a framework as well, a decent framework, a nine stage or 9 component framework. That when you're thinking about people analytics, those are the components or factors that you should think about. Right? It's really good. Right? It's just that they spin their perspective on the same things that I'm talking about today. But they're definitely people you want to follow. Oh, Jonathan Farrar. That's the other guy. Yes, yeah, they're both Canadian, right? So you have David Green and you have Jonathan Farrar. Trying to remember the last name, Farrar. I think that's it, right? So these are actually 2 really good guys to follow. David Green actually shares a lot of those articles that come out in People Analytics. So you want to keep yourself abreast? Yeah, I'm hearing somebody, right? You want to keep abreast of what's going on in People Analytics. David Green actually pulls a lot of stuff in and shares that through his channel. So definitely somebody to follow. Right. I'm hoping at some point in time I'll be able to go to a live conference and meet these guys, have some conversations, and you never know. I might be on a stage having a conversation as well. All right. So when we think about workforce diversity, how does workforce diversity represent itself with your organization? Does your organization think about these things? Have you all ever had conversations in HR about these things, like gender equality, gender pay, equity, not just gender but age? Thinking about the generational gaps, looking at these things, even from like a knowledge perspective. Anybody talk to me? Who wants to talk to me there about that? Looking at age and gender. What about it? Like, what has been some of the things that may have popped up that would have caused you, Lynette, to think about age and gender? Because we're not just looking at it as is, right? It's not just going to be because it's trendy. There must be something. Okay. Right. So you see, there are differences in terms of, let's say, adoption of, changes, adjustments, flexibility, responsiveness, right? Even the acceptance of things that are different. Or how about pardon me, like Wassa? We have a lot of cave people, right? You're familiar with cave people?
Cave people, Kerron?
Yeah. You're not familiar with cave people?
Oh,
do you
the daily
please
rated
share?
workers? You mean
No.
the daily rated workers?
No. All right. Pulling a note here.
We need that one.
That probably went over
Yeah.
my head. You need to
Okay,
tell me
okay.
what that is.
All right. This a little small. So let me just say it. Cave people is an acronym. It's an acronym. Just let me type it first. Right? You get them in every organization. Let me ask you all this. Anytime somebody comes up and say, hey, we want to make an adjustment to this process, we want to incorporate something and make it best and all that kind of stuff, and you get somebody in the back strips in. Like, why they want to change that? Well, since I come
Oh yeah,
here,
we have those. Yeah.
right?
We have a good bit
Right.
of those.
Right. That's citizens against virtually everything. Right? Those are cave people. And when you have cave people, you get a lot of resistance. So this is why you need evidence to kind of show, hey, this is what's happening, because you aren't going to create a compelling argument or be able to justify if you're just using how you feel or what you observe, right? If you have evidence, you show numbers, you show percentages. Yeah, of course. Yes, Dale, for sure. Right? This is why you need to bring a strong point, right? Listen, I'll tell you all something about me personally, right? I have friends who don't like me. They like me, but they don't like me. Because when it comes to like making a point, if they say something and I'm making a point with them or we having a discussion about something, I'm gonna justify it. I'm gonna come and say, well, yeah, so and this and that, and 25% here and whatever they, and they can't come back to me with anything else because I've proven the point, I've justified it. They just can't win an argument with me. Right? So they like me, but they don't like me. But of course, it's all about that same approach, right? If you just say how you feel or what you think, it's not really a strong point, and you are gonna get resistance. You can't fight resistance, but if you come with data and evidence and you show this is what it is, it's very difficult for somebody to resist like openly, and it does actually reduce the level of resistance you're gonna get, because if you prove that, hey, this is gonna add value, then you're okay. Yeah. Um, and yeah, Natasha, it's working good how it is. And good. Natasha, you see that succession planning model there? This is very important because we are looking at, of course, things like attrition. Right? You're looking at attrition, you're looking at those heading into retirement. Because I've actually been in talks with a couple companies with HR people across different companies over the last year. And we've been talking a lot about the offboarding process, right? So we talk about onboarding all the time, right? But we don't really think about the offboarding process. So the offboarding process is like, let's say, looking at the number of employees that you have that are going to retire in the next 2 years, maybe 2, 3, 4 years from now. Those are your experts. Those are your people who would have a lot of organizational knowledge. So we're looking at creating a process where we are trying to capture that knowledge, get them into mentoring, get them into coaching, get them into some kind, even documentation. So that we don't lose the wealth of tacit knowledge that they have, right? So converting it, we're using that to develop the others, the successors, right? Identify successors, let them work with them. And of course, that in itself, there's a lot of resistance there, right? But the last couple of companies where people kind of ask my advice on it, Erika, you might be interested in this statistic. In the next 2 years, or I think 3 years, we are going to lose about 20% of our workforce, right? 20% of them will be retiring. That's a huge chunk, right? And there's a lot of organizational data and talent that we lose. Yeah. Oh, yeah. There is a knowledge management metric. I can't remember it off the top, Natasha. Yeah, but I know that there is a metric, right? And when you leave, because you build a certain level of knowledge, a certain percentage as you go, and then we have a ratio where when you leave in, we could see the actual losses. It's kind of like tipping the mug over how much water you lose. Yeah. Oh yeah, me and this fluidity thing again, right? Y'all, that's the word of the day, guys. Fluidity, right? So when you think about that loss, that knowledge loss, I actually do a lot of knowledge management work, right, within HR, within what I think about, because it's all about, if we have to make good decisions, if we have to have people who are performing, they need that knowledge and on the job knowledge, that experience that we talk about, right? How do we ensure that that experience is passed on to others? And that's what sustainability is all about, right? We don't just want to have one nice set of performers and then when they bust out, we listen, you don't want an organization like West Indies cricket, right? You don't want one generation of stellar genius as the team, but nobody setting up a succession plan, right? But look at it, right? Look at it. Since the glory days of West Indies cricket, when last have we really had a team that nobody could come around, that nobody could beat? Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's the thing, Dale. Business strategy wants sustainability, but the HR strategy that supports the business does not have tools, techniques, policies in place to really support that sustainability with regard to its talent, right? So it's not just about getting new talent and managing those who leave in, but it's about how do we ensure that those who are established in the organization spread that talent across. And this is where we just talked about earlier with the performance and potential. Understanding that first, we'll determine whether or not we have that capability to really spread talent, or we really need to get talent because we don't have enough, right? So having the data to show that evidence is important. All right. So let's start the conversation. Has anybody looked at, let me ask this. Does anyone right now within their organization collect data on ethnicity? No? Like part of your profile, part of the employee data. Have you ever collected that? Do you think, based on your knowledge of your workforce, that people will be willing to share that data? It's more a training thing. It is interesting, Adil. It might be frowned upon, yeah. And this is it. So when you think about collecting different types of data, an easier one that might be easier to collect might be talent data, like knowledge, like educational level. Like I have people sharing, well, what was their highest educational level? But most of the times we get that when they apply, right? We get their resume, we see their certs, but we don't collect it. But then we don't update it, right? How many of you all, you asking, oh, please, birth people, wow, yelling at, that's tough. The US and UK do need to do it because they do have larger policies that guide the data that they have to collect or they have to report on, right? But then they also allow, it's opt-in, right? It's opt-in because you also can say, I prefer not to say, right? So you have people who could opt out from giving you the data, right? Where it can be used at, oh, right. But the thing is, this is another trick, right? From my people analytics experience and any kind of data collection experience, there needs to be a level of transparency in terms of, if we decide we're going to do that kind of exercise, why are we doing it? What's the purpose, right? Just currently, right? And that's the thing, right? There we go. So you have mixed. In Trinidad, you have major groups, right? We have East Indian, we have African, and then we have the mixed group. Then you have all the others, right? So other Asians, Chinese, Thai, Korean, all these others, and then of course Syrian, Lebanese Syrian, and Caucasian, right? So in some organizations, collecting the data, once you prove why you are collecting it. So like if it is, we're looking at it from a employee of choice, if there's some kind of benefit to employees for it, we have to share that because we have to gain trust. So starting small is also another journey here too. So if you start small and you share benefits of, your data analysis with the workforce in terms of, let's say, compensation, other areas that, people are really interested and they realize that, hey, HR is actually doing this for our benefit. So they start trusting. First they respect, then they'll trust, right? They kind of work hand in hand as a symbiotic type of relationship. And when you build that, then if you want to delve deeper into DEI, this is where you start asking those other questions. But here what? Ethnicity is also something that's kind of out in the Caribbean for the most part. So what we could use age, right? We use age and we use gender. So we start understanding, okay, so we have gender gaps that we see. There's sometimes very evident in certain industries. So everybody had to share their gender. There's no hiding that. And age. Yes.
I just have a question about ethnicity, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so like I deal with employee engagement, and it's useful to see what the composition of the workforce is, so that we could, develop, targeted stuff like how many people really celebrate certain things. So I mean, but what do you think is the general thought or trend towards requesting that type of data, though?
Yeah, it's difficult. So I worked in an organization where we collected religion. And here what? That was a huge deal, right? But what we did, right? We revolved it around the big occasions. So like you see things like Eid, things like Diwali in Trinidad, things around Easter. We had small events around those, right? And what we started doing was capturing those who are registering And part of that registration process was asking them if they are active Hindu or active Muslim. Because what we tried to do was we justified it within the survey instrument itself, where we were looking at, okay, we want to ensure that we have the right dietary constraints in place, we have the right things here. We want to practice certain things in a particular order. So we started capturing it in segments over time. And that's how we did it. It wasn't like we just did this exercise, hey, we just want to know everybody religion.
Yeah.
But we tied it back to improving the experience for, let's say, a Diwali event in the company, to know
Right.
who's applying and who are active Hindu, so we know well how to cater. Those who aren't active, we kind of catering something a little different for you too. So you have to share with us whether or not you are active Hindu. So the same thing with other events. And we actually was able to get data, maybe like about half of the workforce shared really, but it was better than zero. So
Yeah.
and when people started to see that we did implement those things within the events, when we had other events and we had the same thing popping up, more and more people were putting it in. So by the time I left that company, we had about half of the data. And I'm certain over time, if they continue that practice, they would have been collecting it, because we kind of show why we need to collect it.
Yeah.
And it was a benefit to the employees, you know?
Makes sense. Thanks.
Yeah, no problems. Yeah, yeah. So when you have very diverse groups, you know, these are things you want to take into consideration. Um, I've also worked with a company that had their teeth in about 4 different territories in the CARICOM, and collecting that data like ethnicity, where they so you have, like, okay, so you had Belize, you had Antigua, St. Kitts, Trinidad, Guyana. And when you start looking at these different territories, collecting that kind of data was also important, right? So we start understanding, because when you're throwing out something, remember, if we have to make decisions on our workforce, understanding the composition of the workforce is important, right? So even if it's a quote unquote small company, you know, to me that's still impactful, because you know, one person is a huge percentage of the workforce, right? They contribute a huge percentage to the workforce. So it's important to understand your workforce composition in as many dimensions as possible. And but the trick is, show what you're doing with the data, action it to build trust, and you will just keep collecting it over time. So they start understanding, well, they're not just collecting this to look at it and say, well, okay, we want to victimize this group, right? It's all about, no, we want to do things for this group, but we need to understand how large a group is, so that will impact how our budgets are and how we need to support them, right? So it's really all about building that trust with the process. Yeah, guys, you all realize how time does fly? You realize we at our break time already? Wow. And so here what we'll do. Let's take off 15 minutes. Yep. Let's take off 15 minutes. We'll come back in 15 minutes. And when we come back, what I'm gonna do, you see the same process. Let me just go back to it. The same process, this 4-stage process that we have here. We are gonna look at it in relation to this diversity case, right? That I have popped up here, right? So let's take off 15 minutes, and I'll see you all back in a little bit. Yeah. Time flies when you're having fun. Good, good. Time to go organize for the lunch and thing, right? Turn up pot. If anybody have any lunch, you'll have to share with me, because I can't turn any pot right now. Perfect, Lynette. That's the way. That's the way it had to be. What? That's what we're talking about, Lynette. All right, guys. So I'm just gonna run away for a few minutes, and I'll meet you all back.
I'm gonna put the session on pause
Yeah.
when we come back.
Hey guys, how's everybody doing? Nice. That's what we're talking about. I definitely know that Lynette here. Nice. So just feeding off of where we left off. Oh, no, no problem, Dale. That's no worries. Yeah, so based on where we left off, we're just talking about the scenario here with regard to diversity. And of course, diversity is as simple as, things like age and gender, right? Understanding the composition of your workforce with regard to the generational gaps, the gender gaps, and all these things, right? And even bringing it to the fore, because when you're looking at, from a strategic perspective, guys, when you want to be employer of choice is also an employer that promotes equal opportunity. So an equal opportunity employer, anytime you hear an organization talking about that, there's a need for us to look into age and gender. The other factors, yeah, they're optional. If your company has the right tactics and techniques to get into it, that's fine. But the core stuff would be age and gender, right? And then, of course, compensation falls into that when you categorize it from that perspective. All right. So let's take a delve in to what we need to think about for this specific case, right? So I'm going to go through all the questions that we have to ask, and we're going to have that discussion through what you need to be thinking about, or what you all think we should be thinking about. And feel free to jump in here at any point in time, because I just tossed some stuff in terms of like what are the items that are related to the case. But if you think that the other items, or you think that maybe something here is just a bit off, maybe it should not be there, feel free and let's have that discussion, right? Now, FYI, there's some cases where I would put in something that may not fit, just to see if people pick up on it, right? So don't beat up yourself too much, right? But let's dive into it. So what do we aim to achieve? Of course, an improved diversity, diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce. Anybody knows what's the extra characteristic they added onto this? Like probably over the last year or two?
Inclusivity and belonging.
Belonging, yeah. So belonging is really tied to that whole, well, inclusion is just really has always been tied towards, yeah, we bringing everybody together, but bringing everybody together does not necessarily mean that people feel like they belong. And that whole inclusivity and contribution is tied towards the level of belonging, right? So it's just how people feel, not the demographic, but that's tied to the psychographic elements of your workforce, right? So some of the KPIs that you'll be looking at, some of the indicators that tie back towards, some of those metrics that will be calculating will be things like gender distribution, will be things like leadership representation of certain groups, right? How does that align to strategy? It ties back into what's talent, right? Talent acquisition, talent retention. It also ties back to the organization as a whole. We talk about employee of choice. And so it does feed back into the competitiveness of the organization, its ability to attract talent and retain talent, and then, of course, its brand itself, because the brand actually accommodates the attraction, right? So from a strategic perspective, we are doing work that supports business strategy, right? What are the issues we're solving? Things like underrepresentation, items such as employee disengagement. So levels of disengagement. Have you all ever noticed, like with historical engagement data, that there are certain groups, you might look at it, yeah, we see departments, we see certain segments that feel that they're not being treated well or treated properly, right? And sometimes we pick up on the fact that it may be based on gender, or it may be based on age and experience, right? Sometimes, which we do always have the data, it may also be based on certain ethnic let's say roots, right? So sometimes if we do have the data, it's very hard to pinpoint exactly what the root cause is. And that's where, as a people analytics professional, you have to go in, have the conversation, do the exploration, and figure out what's really happening, right? In terms of the people analytics approach for this, identifying critical areas that we need to focus on, it's all about priority, right? We can't fix everything all at the same time, so we have to be able to prioritize it. And I spoke about the concept of time, where we need to monitor progress over a period of time, right? That's tying back to the strategy side of it. With regard to the data, what data should we be collecting? The data that we should be collecting would be workforce data, gender, age, ethnicity, I actually have those in the data set that we're going to look at, so we could explore it from there. In terms of talent distribution, we're looking at performance and potential, and we're looking at performance and potential across groups. So if the organization has an average performance level, average potential level for certain groups, we have to look at it from the diversity perspective, right? Look at those factors across those things. And then, of course, engagement and belonging, right? So engagement scores across those groups, those are certainly data that we'll need to capture to start an analysis. Are there any other elements of data you all think we should be capturing here? What you all think? Did I cover everything? Or are there certain things that you think maybe we should be capturing? What you all think? Did I hit it or not? Feel free to tell me. Say, Kerron, you're missing something. But I think it's a good place to start. What you all think? Oh boy, people get quiet. Yeah. So when we think about, yeah, it's a good place to start. And that's the thing, Lynette. Sometimes you just have to start, right? You know, if you don't have the data, you just have some. I've come across a lot of teams who basically hold back because they'll be like, well, we wait until put this thing in place and set this thing up, and then we'll start. There's no wrong time to start, even if you only have some of the data. Because what will happen, Lynette, it's a snowball effect, right? It will snowball into more questions being asked, more data being captured over time, because you start seeing the value of it. And the different stakeholders who are involved here, they would also start seeing the value of it. So when you get that, you will start getting more and more support, and that's how you grow. Yeah. So it's like, Lynette, like a small shop, right? A small shop doesn't magically turn into a huge supermarket overnight, right? Over time, they started small, they keep growing, they use the demand, and they build. So the same way with your analytics process, start small, start with the simple stuff, and start building support for it, and start showing the value of it. And then you'll start delving into more and more. So after a while, this will become the de facto data we collecting. And then you'll realize, oh, I need more data. And you start collecting more. And that's how it just keeps going, right? It'll just keep growing from there, right? So the next question now is, where are we getting this from? And who's going to provide it to us, right? So where would we get the data, right? Internal sources, of course, your HRIS, right? So you look at the HRIS, your performance management system, if it's not part of your HRIS already. Does anyone here have a performance management system that is separate from the HRIS? Or does your performance system have itself integrated into your current HRIS? Where are you all at with that? Are there two separate sources of data? Or can you just grab everything straight from your HRIS? Yours totally manual. Okay, so then, so that means you're just collecting it all in one space, right? They might be separate files, but you could get them in the same space, right? They're separate pattern. Okay, cool. Or they integrated Natasha, all right. So it makes your life a little easier, right? Lynette, even though you're collecting them manually, you would basically have employee numbers for everybody too, right? So the same employee number or ID will be tied back to everything. So yeah, so you're perfect. So you're now able, I think the hardest work there would be, digitizing it, right? Pulling the data in. But what you could do, Lynette, is maybe start like from now. So any new people or anything happening, one by one, as things come up where you have to update things for employees, you put that, you digitize. So like if you start thinking about, okay, on a daily basis, operationally, how much employees get involved and how much you need to actually look at files. And what you do is integrate the data entry part of it as part of what you do. And over time, you will start seeing more and more of your stuff getting digitized rather than thinking of it as this one big exercise, right? So little by little, you just kind of do it and start it from there. Yeah. Good. Happy to share that idea with you. Yeah, Rika, yeah, integrated so it makes it much easier. We could track a lot of things inside of there. And of course, I think for most of you all, I would admit that many companies underutilize their HRIS, right? The problem is, right, an HRIS is a data system. And when you have people who are not data people managing the HRIS, so you have HR people managing HRIS, it's great because it's HR data, but it's not so great because your HR people are not data people. So you end up with data that is not really managed well, the level of integrity of the data kind of goes down, or there's a lot of data elements that are missing, right? And I've seen that all over the place. I've ended up being in projects where we had to fix it. Almost, I would say probably 60% of the HR departments I've worked in, I was pulled into a project that we had to do where we had to clean up, we had to reconcile, we had to do all kind of fancy stuff with an HRS to get it to the state where we need it. So an HRS is a database system for employee data, but then we have people who are not database experts managing it. And that's where you get the problem. So it's sometimes very difficult to call your HRS the ultimate source of truth, right? This is why you need those Excel skills, guys, because when you pull your reports from your HRS, you're looking at an Excel worksheet that may not have, consistent data, that may have missing data. You have to figure it out. You have to fill the gaps. So when you start pulling, for you to do your analysis, and that's how I learned Excel over the years, for you to do your analysis, you have to have the skills to create it yourself, right? Because you can't depend on the HRS to get everything done, right? You could get the best HRS, but if your HR people run it, you're in problems, right? Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes they do get painful, Natasha. What I do is I pull and I have a master list that I kind of keep. And from there, I kind of do the updates. So, and so I kind of keep it. And then when I need to answer certain questions, I just pull what I need from it. So it might look like a lot, but you don't need a lot all the time. You only need bits and pieces of it as you need. Yeah. Yep. That's the problem, right? So what you need to do, Lynette, is probably also have some kind of quality component within your process. And this goes for everybody too, even with the HRIS. So when people are entering data, make sure you have somebody to review it. It don't have to be immediately, right? If you don't have the manpower to do it, but it don't have to be immediately. What you could do is have the exercise where people entering stuff today, and maybe by next week somebody will review it, or the next employee who has to do something around it review. And they kind of check it off. Like, okay, a file was reviewed, you have a check. Like if you have the physical files in it, have one of those little checklist stuff on the inside jacket. So this is something I did years ago. And you have this, and you put the date, and you check it off. So you'll be like, I have my name, today's date, checked, reviewed, all these things. Oh, if I pick up any issues, take note of it, alert the supervisor, alert whoever, and we make the fix in one time. So that's how you do it, piece by piece, and you'll get it done, right? Don't think of everything as this whole big chunk of work that you have to do, but piece by piece, and the process will guide it, right, as you go. So who will provide us? Of course, HR, right, with the HR-related data that we have. Finance may have additional compensation data that we may not be collecting in our HRS. So things like, deductions, additional things that employees paying for. This has been part of an exercise I did before, and it was very, very insightful. We picked up trends of employees who are really strained financially, like who taking a lot of loans and paying off a lot of stuff. That's huge, right? It actually contributed towards lack of engagement, because these guys going through a lot of pressure, and then they come into work for work and they're not performing up to par. And then, of course, because they face any brunt of, that lack of performance, it led towards disengagement. So, and then the organization came up with an initiative where they kind of helped employees with certain financial things. They provided financial literacy and all that kind of stuff, and it alleviated some of those issues. Of course, behavioral stuff takes time. So it's not something that's going to be done overnight, but it is something along the right path. And it did actually help, right? And employees appreciate it. Yeah. So within finance, yes, yeah, payroll, I will provide that. And then if you have other arms of finance, so like when I used to work in the banks, you had a whole bunch of things that employees were involved in around the finance area. So we were able to collect that data as well. And of course, line managers. So line managers will give us any kind of data we want from a behavioral perspective. So if we're looking at, how people, like a 360 feedback, right? So we get 360 feedback items here. We could get interviews done, focus groups, and all these things, especially with smaller groups. So I'm just tossing out different ideas here just to show you all the whole range of approaches you can take to collect data and capture data, right? So if it doesn't sit in HR, that's not a problem. And if you don't already have it collected, that's not a problem, right? Start with it. Look outside HR. I'm certain there are many different data points you'll probably may have overlooked before, but they are there, right? Capture that data. Simple time and attendance data, a lot of people don't collect, right? But if they have it manually, if you set up a small system to start capturing it, you will see that linkage between attendance and punctuality and performance, right? Sometimes the way we think about it, but sometimes the other way around too. All right. And it highlights different things with regard to shifts, with regard to different supervisors, different managers, and how they manage staff. Yeah. Right. So what tools we're going to use? Of course, your core processing, like in this case, we're going to use Excel. For the intelligence and dashboards, you can use Power BI. If there are any other technologies that you could think about, like the analytics extension or an analytics module within your HRS, or if you have some kind of cloud, some kind of data warehouse where there's other data being shared by other departments, you could go there. Because let's say marketing, they might share the NPS survey stuff with you all. Maybe even feedback from customers who are willing to take part in events because of quality service that they receive. We could collect that. Marketing may have that data somewhere in the data warehouse, and you could easily access it. Just ask the right people, justify your requests, and they give you real-time access to certain data sets, right? So you can get that within your organization based on how they work. Nice. So let's take a look at our data, right? And we have some stuff that I want to do. Well, we'll do a pivot table after, right? So let's jump in to our data set. So here we go. So yes, all the sheets. Let me just zoom in a bit so it might be a little clearer for you all looking on the screen, right? So I have a couple of tables, quite a number of tables. All your data when you're collecting should be in a tabular form, right? Yeah, so we have salary grades. I'll just walk through all. Let me just kind of make sure everything is looking good. Good. We're not gonna use all of these today, right? Because some of these were things that we looked at in our workshop and all these things, but having the range of data here is good for you all. This is a nice little sandbox file for you all to play around in, do some digging up, play around with some pivot tables, and how we're gonna look at data models today. So you'll start seeing, okay, how do I pull all this data together, right? Because watch, let me just jump back to the slide. Because when I spoke about, data sources, we get the data from different sources, right? So how do we get all of these things compiled into, what we're looking for? We could use Excel and we could use Power BI for these things. You could simply copy and paste from one file, dump it into a singular file like what I've done here. So you have like different worksheets with different items. So I have the employee listing, right? Their department, division, hire date, exit date. We'll have to calculate some tenure. We'll have to calculate their, determine their status and all these things. We will do some functions for that, right? We have their salary. We have the employee type, right? Basic employee data you'll get from an HRS. Other data I have here that you would also get from an HRS to an extent. We have their gender. We have their date of birth. I have ethnicity and I have education level. Well, highest education level, right? So we have persons with undergrad degrees, associate degrees, high school diplomas, that kind of stuff, right? So we have a fair mix and a fair amount of factors that we could use, right? There we go. Yeah, so we'll have to calculate that, right? Yeah, Natasha, we're going to calculate some age, right? So we will include that here. That's what I'm saying, like, even if your HRS does it, so like there are a couple of HRS systems where the HRS will determine the tenure. Let's see. How could you capture contracted staff engaged multiple periods over the years? That's a real good question. So based on employee type, and okay, so Tamika, question. Multiple periods over the years, was it continuously? Or were they like peak time? Or
No, we have been following the requirements for there to be a period of separation. And so the policies currently is that they be disengaged for a clear 3 weeks period.
Right. Okay. So hold on. Let me do something here. I want to open up a PowerPoint slide and let me answer that question. Because I'll help you understand the data behind it, right? Because we could do this. So let me just create a new one. Right. Now, when you're thinking about data, and capturing that type of data, what will happen is, let me insert a text box here. Right. So what will happen is we have an employee, and that employee is uniquely identified by a number. So we have some form of ID for this particular person, whether or not they are current employee, right? So you'll always have, right. Oh, you have a master list with the first start date and then any notice subsequent. Yes. So what you want to do is have a profile of the person here. So the employee, basically you have an employee profile in one sheet. So this employee will only appear once here. So this employee profile will have their core information, right? Like an ID, etc. Right? And what you'll want to have would be a separate sheet that captures the ID, but it has the employee record. So it'll have the ID which ties back here. So basically you'll only have like one record over here, one record of the ID over here. But in this other record, you'll have the ID, then you'll have, whatever start date, whatever end date, what the role is, because they may have multiple roles. There may be the possibility that their record, they might have multiple roles within the organization, right? So this way, it makes it easy for you to track, right? And different start date, end date, and of course, you'll have things like status, right? So this way, the employee profile and all their core information, like the information you're gonna have within your record of the employee itself. So their demographics, their core information they need to get the job. But then you have the employee record, which will be their history, their employment history, right? So yeah, so let's say employment history here, just to separate it a little more. So the employment record, it will have the same employee ID, but they'll have it multiple times, and this is what will create that connection. So when you're analyzing the data, you will actually see, you could get a full employee record of all the times they were hired, rehired, what periods they were active, what periods they were inactive, and all these things. Make sense? What do you think, that, Tamika? Right?
That's good. That's good.
Yeah, because that's the only way you can really track it. Like what happens, I think, with the HRS we have right now, they try to do it, but it's not really capturing the way it should. So we have something called you have the employee ID, but you also have like I think it's a profile ID or something like that. So the profile ID would be like an employee would have multiple profile IDs for every time they were employed. So sometimes, like when employees do like lateral moves,
Yes.
when employees have lateral moves, their employment record not supposed to change because their ID not supposed to change. But the position that they had, the role that they had, would have a different ID. So they'll have like a different position ID. So when we try to run reports, sometimes I don't think we get the historical stuff. The way it's set up, it's kind of weird. So you don't always get that. I think you have to do like a separate report just for that. But because I wasn't like trained directly in what they were doing and how it was done, how it was managed, sometimes it's like pulling teeth when you're trying to pull that kind of data because you don't always get it very easily.
Frustrating.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Yeah. Sometimes it is, and so sometimes I have to go back to the employee file, maybe ask for it. I haven't done that where I am right now, but I've done it historically where I looked at the file and then I went back into the system to try to find where those other data elements are. And once I kind of figure out how the structure of the database is, then it might be a little easier to run the reports to capture this kind of stuff. But separating it is essential because you only have one, it's basically one person, right? There's only one employee here, but there are many instances where they would have been hired. So this is the relationship you're looking at, and this is how you could really connect your data. So it's easy because you can say, well, I know this employee. I have records of all the employees themselves separately. So I know generally who the people are. But then the employment records are different. So just connect them with the ID. So you'll have many instances of this person's ID in the other sheet. And you don't have to worry because you could all just connect them back to this one employee, right? You'll see some examples of me doing that here when we're looking at the data, when I build the data model from this data itself, right? Yeah. But let's do some simple calculations, and of course it's based on some of this stuff. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Correct. Yeah, because you see that process, you must have the employee record, right? So you could do your reconciliation and check it out in terms of when they were employed, how many weeks, because you do have to do it for the TD4s anyway. Yeah, so that's a good idea there, Natasha. Like, and you see how the fluidity comes in, right? Because that process in terms of the payroll process, the taxation process, they all tie back into the employment record and the employees themselves, that process. And yeah, the audit as well, because you are ensuring that your data is on point with regard to the audit trail that you're leaving. All right. So based on the document I shared, that PDF document that I had shared earlier. All right. So let me jump to it. It's actually here. There are a couple of key Excel functions that I would have included here. Concatenate is one. Well, you see, well, that's good because you have 12 cycles, right? You have 12 cycles for the year that allows you to do your reconciliation on a smaller scale too, right? And then you could do the larger one at the end of the year for the period for the TD4s, right? Now, the concatenate function is a really cool one to have because it allows you, well, this simple example I use here was just with name, right? But the concatenate function can be used to combine any kind of data that you have if you need to bring them together. So let me just jump to my Excel sheet here. I don't think there's anything I need to concatenate at this point, but the concatenate function can really bring a lot of things together. Let me see. No, I don't need to concatenate anything. I just dropped it on the list because I think that this is a really important one. It helps you transform your data. So you notice when I'm combining these cells here, it will pull them as is. So you see Jimmy Lakeshore here is one string of text. But you could actually put in things like how I put in spaces there. You could put in spaces with it, dashes, anything you want, even additional text, right? So let me do an example here. So I could drop in like any kind of text we have here. So let's say I could put concat equal concat, right? And I could put the word troublesome. Oh, and I'll have to put a space in, right? So I'll put a space with the word troublesome, and I'll put in gender, right? If I do that, here I have troublesome male. All right. Listen, I know you all like that, but here what? If I double click and bring it all the way down, well, for the most part, I'll have troublesome females as well, right? Just letting you all know, right? I know I'm outnumbered here, but I could give you all some trouble too, right? So yes, indeed, Natasha, right? So you could actually put in any kind of string you want. So if you notice, I put in that with the space in it. So if I just put the word troublesome with no space, it will pull it as is and you'll get it without the space. But you could combine basically anything using concat, right? It's one of the easiest ways to manage any kind of data combination that you want to do, right? So like I could come now and put that with a space at the start of it so it'll separate it. And I could put, let me just put a space, just a random space in here, and I'll put ethnicity. So I could just come, here we go. And if I bring that down, it just pulls all the values from those cells. And we have everything here. So let me show you all a trick here now, right? Check this out. There's a little trick I think you all might like because you might end up doing this very often in Excel. You all know you could move cell contents, right? So you see, like I could take this cell here, this is G2, and I could drag it over here using the move icon and just drop it, right? But if you notice something, when I drop it, it's still the formula, the function that I did here, right? Sometimes people would come and, you might right click here, copy and then you'll right click over there, paste, but you choose like paste values. So that way it will not take the function, it'll just be random text. Right? So it's just straight text. If you look at the top, if I double click on it, there's no function, no formula, anything. It's straight text. But what do you do? What do you do if you want that text to be here instead of the function? How do you copy and paste it back here? What would you all do? So some of you might come and say, okay, well, I could right click copy and I could paste it right here back as a value. You see it? I could paste it back and it's now a value, right? But then you want to do that for everything? That's such a long set of work. Yeah, even if you highlight the whole range and do all that drama, right? So let me show you all a trick. If you move over to where the move icon is, anywhere on the border of what you're selecting, check this out. What you have to do is not just pick it up and move it, You have to actually move it with the right mouse button. So you hold on the right mouse button and you're moving this stuff. So there's no right click, copy and paste here. You're holding on the right mouse button and you're dragging this. And I'm going to just drag it right back in the space it was in. You have to take it out to bring it back in, right? So if I drop it back in here, what happens when you release the right mouse button? It comes up with a little context menu here. And it asks you, what do you want to do? So do you want to move here? Do you want to copy here? Do you want to copy here as values only? Do you want to copy here as formats or link and all that kind of stuff, right? So I'll just say copy here as values only. And boom, there's no more function. All of this is a straight data value. Well, just the top part that I did here. All this is just a straight data value. See, text. We all think about that. So it's not just about moving things around in Excel using your normal mouse button. You could use the right mouse button and you get a context menu every time you move your stuff. Right? So if I right click, drag over here, it'll ask me, do I want to move here or copy here? I can just say copy here. So I'll get a carbon copy over here. Cool, right? So Excel gives us a lot of options when it comes to working with our data and molding it how we see fit, especially for analysis, right? So let me just kind of get rid of all this stuff here. Nice. So we were just talking about getting an age because we have their date of birth. Me getting their date of birth was intentional, right? We want to get their age. So I'm just going to insert a column here. Now you can do it at the end here too. It doesn't really matter where you put it. So let me put age over here. So I have a new column here called age. And I want to calculate their age. How do I calculate the age of this individual? What would you all do if you all have to do this right now to calculate the age of the individual? Tell me. Ah, boy.
I could, a simple column, put this here, minus from whatever C is. I don't know, something like that.
Yeah, because you could put like a date somewhere here, right? So I could, if I throw a date there, yeah, the date will be there. Just because of the table formatting, it's not gonna show. Some people just put a date here, and then from this they'll just minus that, right? So you'll go to Google in it. Look, Natasha actually has it here, but Natasha, that looking like something I did in a workshop, right? So what the difference or DATEDIF function is, I actually have it here. We will do some lookups on it. Look at it. So what it does, it calculates the difference between two dates, and you determine how you want it. Ah, okay, Natasha, that's all right. That's why I shared it anyway, right? And you'll see, it will select whatever two dates you want. But what I did was actually use the today function, and what the today function does is it changes automatically every day. So you don't have to come back, 6 months later, I'll be like, oh, shucks, I have to update this because people age change, people got older, I have to go and recalculate. So you don't have to. you could use the today function, and every day when you come back, it's gonna update. So the today function is a really cool one. So you don't have to go enter in the date all the time. And if you like Rika, if you have that date up here, like if you have the date here, instead of like putting any manual date like this, you can actually put equal today. You see it? So even if you do this, the next time you open up the Excel workbook, the date is going to automatically update anyway. So if you were using that, it would be correct, right? But then you don't really want to depend on like a lot of external cells for this calculation, right? So we can leave it inside of it, and it makes it safer. So it really isolates it in here. So I can now come and put equal. And the thing with this, guys, right? You'll notice when I open the brackets and all these things, it's not going to work like the other Excel stuff, because Excel has basically deprecated this function. They don't use it. They don't have it in their official list anymore, but it still works. And to me, it's one of the best date functions you have out there to calculate ranges and all these things. There's like network days, and there's DATEDIF. There's another one, I think DATEDIF or something like that they use. But this one actually, because you could customize the output and all these things, it's a little simpler to understand, and to me, it's a little more flexible, right? So as HR people and dealing with people, and I talk about the concept of time, we will always have to be working with dates and trying to figure out things like tenure, things like age, and all these other things, right? So working with dates and periods will always be something that we'll have to be involved in. So understanding this function is important. So I'm going to calculate the difference between the date of birth and today. Now, it's not case sensitive, right? I could have typed this in lowercase. It's not case sensitive. And I'm going to calculate it in months, right? And let me just calculate the months first. So you'll see, okay, so we have 651 months. There's a reason why I would use months here. I explained it here in the example, because like, look at this guy, right? 26th of May, we got 8 as his tenure. If we take the month value and we divide it by 12, we'll get the same year, but it's a little more precise, because when you use year, it rounds it off by year. It's just like your age, right? I don't want to ask anybody your age right now, but you're not going to tell me that you're 26.66 years old. You are 26 until the day of your birthday. So the day before your birthday, you're like 26.99 years old, right? So we don't actually do that. We basically round it off. So the best way to get a more accurate figure is use the months and then just divide by 12, and you'll get the real value by year, right? So I don't think we need to stress with the date of birth for this. So I could probably, let me just put the year here. Right, so you see this guy is 54 years old, and if I just double click on the bottom right corner, it will autofill it all the way down. Right, so I have everybody's age here. Yeah, using the simple formula, well, this function, and because I'm using today, this will automatically update as time goes by, right? So it will always be accurate. You don't have to question it, right, in the future, because the today's date will always update, and so you'll always get the most up to date. So if we hit the 10th of October this year, 11th of October this year, we come back to this sheet, this guy is going to be 55. That's the value you're going to get there. So this will always update itself if you continue using this worksheet, right? So that's one. The other one I think I have here within the employee listing, we have tenure. Now, tenure is an interesting one. So here what? Let's do status first. So if we're looking at employee status, how do we know the options we have with employee status is active or inactive, right? How do we calculate that? How do we determine whether an employee is active or inactive? What are we using right now within this data set for that? It's based on, right. Oh, get on bad. Right. Yes, Natasha, it is based on their exit date. So if an employee doesn't have an exit date, it means that they're currently still in the organization. If somebody doesn't have a record of them leaving, they're still active. So when we look at the if function, Guys, the if function is one of the most versatile functions in Excel. Yes? No, that's not cheating. You're ahead of the class. Virtual gold star for you there, Natasha. Right? So the if function is a really, it's such a simple function, but it's very, very powerful. If you realize it only has three things. We testing for something, and if we testing for a condition could either only be true or false, right? So if we test for something, if that whatever we're testing for is true, in the second section we'll put whatever happens. This could be anything, guys, and that's the beauty with the if function. It could be, we could just put some text, like, in the example here, active or inactive, or we could do a different calculation here. And here, with the value if it's false, if the condition doesn't happen or we testing for, we could do a different set of work here. So it's kind of like what? It's kind of like taxes, right? So we tested maybe, what's the personal allowance now? They updated it, right? It's what, 80,000 now in Trinidad? So if you earn less than 80,000 for the year, you basically pay zero tax. Is 90? 90. Oh, yes, that's 500 more. Yes, it was 84 before, right? Sorry, my bad, Rika. It was 84. Now it's 90 because it went from 7,000 to 7,500 a month. Right, my bad. And so you could do a simple test on somebody's salary where if annual is less than 90, then the value if it's true, then tax is zero. Otherwise, tax will be whatever their current annual salary is minus 90 and divide by 4, because that will be the 25% tax. You see? So I could have two different calculations here. And based on whatever the condition is, whether or not it made the condition or didn't make the condition, we do different calculations. How cool is that? Basically, you have Excel helping you, right? Doing some of these manual and automated type of work on its own, right? So like in the example, the condition I was checking to see if the exit date is a blank cell. If exit date is blank, it means that the person is active, because if this condition is true, it means they're still in the company. Otherwise, if it's not true, they're inactive. So like with this guy, no exit date, he's active. As soon as we put an exit date, he's inactive, right? So the if function is a really simple, just three parts there. And once you understand those three parts, you can do anything you want within those spaces, right? So let me jump back. Now, guys, you're gonna stop me anytime, right? If I'm moving too quick or you want extra clarification or me to redo something, don't afraid, let me know, right?
I would appreciate if you would go over that formula for me.
All right, good. So it has three parts. It has a condition or a test. So it's looking at what is being analyzed or evaluated. So like in my example, we're checking to see if there's an exit date for the employee. Yeah. Right? We're testing to see whether or not there was an exit date for the employee. So my test was if D2 in this case, that's the cell here, D2, if D2 is empty, right? If it has no value. So if it has no value, what happens? It means that our employee is active. So I'm saying if that condition is actually true, just like in this case, D2 is blank. So if it actually is true, the condition is I'm going to put some text in this cell and say that the employee is active, because that's their status, right? If D2 is not empty, so the next part of it here is the value if it's false, if it doesn't meet the condition. So if the exit date actually has a date in it, right, then we will say that this person is inactive. Make sense?
Karen, what other types of where this formula would be relevant? So like exit date is one. Any other common times we might have to use this?
All over the place, Rika. Don't worry, we're gonna do it a couple times here. I'll show you a few more examples. Yeah. It's a very, very flexible type of function. You could use it anywhere where you need something to be done. Like if you have to go check in something for an outcome to be a particular way. So it's like let's say spot awards. So I think I had status of things like the awards and stuff. If it was collected, I had the status as completed. If people were notified that they could come for this stuff, we have the status as processed. So anywhere you have to have some kind of output that is dependent on some other kind of data, we could use an if function for that. Make sense, Rika? So
Yeah.
so basically, we're basically saying like if something happening here, if it's one thing, we need something over here. If it's something else, we need something else over here. So anytime you have like different cases in your head,
Oh,
right?
sure.
So somebody either completing something or somebody still processing something, or like the tax thing. Like if somebody earning over here, we need to determine whether or not they need to pay tax. So do they need to pay tax? Yes or no? Okay, we calculate now. If they need to pay tax, yes, what is the tax?
I
If they
guess
don't need to pay tax, it's zero.
yeah.
Is
I
it?
was thinking like in training, say if somebody doesn't have a score, then you know that it's incomplete.
Yes.
Yeah.
Only when they put in a score or they put in the value or they put in the response, then we'll say, okay, it's accurate or it's correct or complete. Otherwise,
Programming, the program completed.
yeah. So it's a very simple way to get Excel to do stuff for you rather than you manually doing stuff. So it helps you automate a lot of things in here. So this is a very simple example, but I am going to do one a little more complicated than this. And you'll see it in a little bit, right? So I think that more complicated example is with tenure. You'll see it just now, right? So let me do status. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm just going to go into the cell. And I'm doing the same thing we just did with the example here. So I'll say equal if. And you see now, because it recognizes if, not like the DATEDIF function we had earlier, right? It recognizes the if function. So you're seeing the whole structure here now. So he's asking me, well, what you want to test? What's the test here? So the test is, I'm testing the exit date if it's equal to blank. Right? Now you could put the word blank too, but I like just kind of leaving it with no characters. So it's basically an empty cell. So I'm saying now if exit date is blank, if it is blank, what do we do? So if it is blank, we put some text in here. So anytime you want to put text in a cell, through a function, you have to put it in quotes. So I put the active here in quotes. So it's saying, okay, if there's no exit date, this person is active. Otherwise, right, if that test fails, if it means that there is a date, like in this third record here, then this person is inactive. Right? And I'll just close the bracket. Right? So that's it. This is all my if function is doing. Right? So if I press enter, it's testing this cell over here, and you see it's empty, so it's saying active. Let me test it and see if it's working properly, right? Let me put a random date. Let's put today's date in here and press enter. See? It failed the test. Right? So the condition I was testing to see if this was empty. So it is not empty. So it didn't go to active, it went to inactive. If I take out the date to the original record, see, it's back to active. And these are some of the little magical things people who don't know, they watch it like, hey, how you do that? How you get to do that? And be like all these wows and oohs and ahs and all these things, right? But this is a very, very simple if function. But all you have to think about, guys, you know what's the cool thing? The cool thing about the if function is that it aligns to how we speak. You don't realize that? The cases that you are getting into, you realize, how do you use the square brackets? The square brackets here are basically because this is a table. So because this is a table, you get the square brackets. So this table is employees, is the employees table. And because it's a table, when you select a cell, you see the at exit date. The at exit date means you're just looking at the exit date for this record. So it comes up only because this is a table. Now, if it wasn't a table, you would have just seen the regular. So like, if I had a date here, let me just put a random date, right? So if I put a date there and I do my if here, right? So equal if this C equal blank. active or inactive. Same thing, right? But you notice that it doesn't have all the fancy stuff here. It just has the cell reference. But it drops in. So like if I clear this, it'll be active. If I put back the date, it's inactive. So the if function works the same. But because this is in a table, it recognizes the field. So this is the field of exit date. Right, Tamika? So once you're working on a table, it will pick up that. Yeah. So if I double click on this now, double click on the bottom right here to autofill it. See what it does? So it actually will detect wherever somebody has an exit date and it will make them inactive. Yeah. So my function works. So as I update this worksheet, if at some point you may have to do some updates here, let's say this person exited, I drop in a date, it automatically makes them inactive. So you don't have to, how many times have you all done these things manually and some update was here and you forgot to make the change here? Or what happens sometimes, somebody might type the wrong thing. Somebody might misspell inactive. Somebody might misspell active for some reason. So you end up with 3 different variations of the same term. And that makes analysis a headache. You have to come back and fix. So it helps with consistency of the data too, so that you don't have to be wondering if this is correct, right? Yeah. So let me just take out this exit date. Yeah, more than 1 million. Now what just right? What just, guys? What's something here? Tenure is actually something we'll have to use an if function for. So how we getting the date for tenure here? Isn't it just like the date I had put in for the age, right? So you see age, you use date difference and date of birth today, right? We basically doing the same thing here, right? But not the date of birth field, we are using the higher date field to calculate tenure, right? So if I just start typing, so DATEDIF, I'm using the higher date, pull in today's date, right? And tenure, I'll definitely want in months, and I'll divide by 12, right? So we'll get tenure by year. So right, so this person hired in August 2018 has worked 5.5 years so far, right? Just under 5.5. But if I pull this down, let's say just these first few here, it's wrong for these guys, right? Because they left. This person now working here 8 years. This person left the organization less than 2 years, right? Less than 2 years tenure. So there's a different calculation I have to do here. So the difference will be the difference between hire date and exit date. So if I press enter here, this is correct. 1.3 is correct. But I'm not going to go manually checking all these things and putting this in, right? I don't want to do that. Because what's something here? If this person exits, right? And 5 months from now, this tenure will remain the same. The tenure will increase, right? Because it's using today's date. I might see this person 5 months from now with nearly 6 years of tenure. So what do we do? Rika, you're seeing how we'll need an if function here to do these 2 different calculations?
Yeah.
And the condition we will be testing will also be exit date. So watch it, right? I'll build it as we go. So we have 3 parts here. So I'm just building the if function. Well, actually, let me just do it from scratch. So I'm saying if exit date is blank, right? Now the condition here, let me just type it out first, right? And then I will expand on it. So I'm just going to put some text here. It means that their tenure up to today, right? We want to calculate their tenure up to today because if they have no exit date, they are still active employees and they're working up to today. But if there is an exit date, we want to calculate tenure between hire and exit dates, right? So if I just put the text for now, right, let me just expand this field. So you see tenure up to today, and if I send this all the way down here, you'll see what? Tenure between hire and exit, tenure between hire and exit, but tenure up to today, right? So you see the if function is recognizing that we could do different things. So first things first, instead of it just being simple text, this area where I put in the text, this is the value of true area. This is where I will do my calculation. So you see, this is where the if function gets so flexible because you could do anything you want in here, right? So I'm gonna do my DATEDIF here, right? Between hire date and today. Right, and in months, divide by 12. So you see, all I did was replace the text I just had, right, with the function. That's all I did.
You could
Right?
just read from the beginning. So what the formula is saying now. So we say if the date is blank.
If the date is blank,
then we just want the difference between the higher date and today.
And today. So we want to get tenure up to today because there's still active staff.
Okay.
Yeah.
But do you have to do one saying if exit date has something? Then
no, because you see the false area down here where I have tenure between exit and hire date.
Oh, that's the second part. Okay.
I could do the second calculation here. But let me see how this one working, because for the true I have the calculation and for the false I just have some text. So we'll see that so you see here it's working on the 5.4, but if I drag it down, you see I'm getting the calculation up to today, but I'm not getting the calculation here because I just have text. So what I need to do now is go back in and say, okay, well, I have to calculate tenure between hire and exit. So watch, all I'll do is just copy this calculation here, put it in the false. I just put it in here. And instead of today, I don't need to work out for today. I need to work out between hire date and exit date. Yeah? So let me, up at the top here, I'm not sure if you'll seen it clearly, but there's a, hold on. Let me see if I could get this thing to work. Right? So you see there are 3 lines here. Let me see if I can't make this bigger because I'm in the cell. But you see and watch. First we have the test if the exit date is blank. And this, if the exit date is blank, we calculate in tenure up to today. And if the exit date it has a date, it means they exited, we have to calculate it between the hire date and the exit date. Yeah? So let me just press enter there. And if I drag this down, there you go. So these guys, I'm getting the 1.3 years. This one, I'm getting 7.5 years, 7.2 years, because they left in November 22, 14, all these things. And then I have some current staff here, right? And if I drag this down here, this guy worked about, what, 5 years? You'll calculate that, yeah, 5 years. And going down here, this current person hired almost 7 years ago, right, 6.7. So the if function is a very, very versatile function, and it's a very critical one for you all to practice, because when you're working with HR data and time frames and cases, you would have to decide, certain employees might have certain records, you might want certain things in place, you might want their status to change based on what's happening with their other data, and all these different things. So the if function accommodates like different cases. Yeah, sure. Yeah, let me drop it in. Now, the main thing, guys, don't get caught up with like the individual calculations. The main thing here is to think about the structure. So an if function, let me make it real simple here for you. An if function is simply the condition or the test what you're testing for, true and false. That's it. 3 parts to this thing. One is the test, Two, what would you do? What do you want Excel to do if that happens? And then the third part, what do you want Excel to do if it doesn't happen? Make sense? Right? The if function is very, very flexible. It's very simple, but it's very powerful. And if you get a handle of this if function, practice it. And guys, watch. I am so happy for you all to have been accompanying me along this journey, right? To share what I know and to develop yourself. Feel free anytime to reach out. You're trying to do something, you're working on something and you're getting some problems with it. Let me know. I could always take a look at it and give you some guidance, help you mold, polish your formula, check something out, maybe give you another perspective on it. If you want to enhance your perspective, feel free to reach out, right? And I'll assist as best as I could. Oh, I have the bonus stuff, but I'll work on it for you directly, right? Who had sent me the bonus stuff, the bonus data? I will take a look at it because you may have to consider some functions like that too, right? Who had sent me that? Lynette, you had sent me that? I can't recall who had sent it to me through the... Natasha, you had sent it? Right. So, yeah. Natasha, you don't realize it's something like this you may have to do? Right? But you may have to look at the conditions. Because sometimes... Yeah?
Yeah, I
Right?
realize it's something like this, but how do I need to change but the look at the information is where I'm
Right.
getting most of my problems.
Right. No problem. No problem. I'll help you with that over the course of the week, right?
Thank
I was
you.
just really swamped this week as well.
I can
So,
understand. I know how that does go, Kerron. I think we all do.
yeah. Right. So yeah, y'all see how the if function will save us a lot of time, right? Rather than going through and trying to figure out. And what happens now is that if somebody else leaves the job and we have some kind of exit date over here, it will stop calculating this. So this will remain at 4. Right? It's not going to change anymore. And of course, the status will change to inactive. So what this does, it helps with your data integrity because you don't have to manually make changes all the time or have to go and update and do all kinds of crazy things, right? These functions actually help you, right? So we've done some pretty decent things here so far, right? We've calculated tenure, we've determined status. We have some other little things we need to do, especially in performance. So here's my performance sheet. I think y'all remember the sheet. So we have employee performance and employee potential. And from here, we want to determine, what is their performance description. So if at 5, we want this to have exceeds expectations. If their potential is 1, we want to show that they are limited in their potential. And then I already have this one here. I'm not going to show you all this because this one, I'll probably have to do something with you all or create some kind of recorded session because this will take a little while to explain how the XLOOKUP works. But it pulls it from a grid, right? So it pulls the whole grid here. It uses both the potential and the performance here, right? To really feed into what talent is. But these are, what you'll have to do here are lookup functions. So you already have tables with, values connected with each other. So like 1 is below, 3 is meets, 4 is exceeds, etc. And you want to use that value to look up what the description is. Now, I do also have that in our sheet here. And that, my friends, is a lookup function. Where is it? Here we go. Now, you see how the if function has three items? The lookup function has 4 items. Now, I'm just going to go through one example of the lookup, and then we'll go to lunch. So we'll come back and finish this up, and then we'll do our analysis, etc. Right? But the lookup function has 4 spaces, and this is like the easiest one I've come across to explain it. Right? Okay. Let me ask you all this. I want to put you all in a scenario. You have, let's say, an HR assistant that you need to get a file. Tell me, how would you tell that HR assistant to find the file? Usually, what do you do? What do you do? How would you tell them to get this file for you? So let's say it's an employee file. what would you do? What are the instructions you would give to this HR assistant to find this file for you, a physical file? Tell me. You want to ask somebody for files? You also get yourself?
Well, yeah, I just can't find myself, but but you tell them if you have to go to the filing room, you tell them the filing room number. You tell them if it's in the cabinets or the cabinets you tell them it's in like probably the gray cabinets. Files are sorted by alphabetically by a surname, and you would usually see the labels on the drawers, and
Right.
you can look for it from there, basically.
Nice. Yeah, basically same thing, That's what the VLOOKUP does. So, okay, Leonard, cool. Nice. Yes, Rika, name, category, staff, right. So, what you tell them, good, yeah, Padmini, yeah, same thing. And the lookup does this exactly like that, right? So, watch it. You tell the staff, I'm looking for employee 0059. You need to go filing room number 1, cabinet 3. Right? And I want you to pull out from the file their marriage certificate. And you need their file. I don't want somebody else's file. I only need their file. You see it? So the lookup function does the same thing that we think about logically, but in a structured way as instructions to Excel to say, hey, I need you to find what a description, right? But let me just come back to the Excel worksheet here. You are using number 5. I wanted to use this number to look over here in this table and pull the description and only the description for this number exactly. If you can't find it, don't give me anything. You see how that makes sense, right? It makes sense? What do y'all think? Right? Now let's put it in action. And I'm going to walk you through it, right? There are 4 pieces to this thing. And it's the same thing I just highlighted here. So first things first. Equal the lookup. That's the function, right? So I want you to look for a file format. That's the first thing you tell them, right? And then you give them the details. So you are looking for the performance level 5. You are looking for that performance level 5 over here in this table, in the performance grid table I have here. You are pulling the description, which in this case is the second column, and you are bringing it for me. And you are only giving me the exact match. I don't want what it is for 4. I don't want what it is for 3. You either find the 5 or don't find anything for me. So I press enter here, and I'm going to see exceeds expectations. What y'all think? What y'all think about the VLOOKUP?
Get lost in the formula.
Don't think about the formula yet, Rika. Don't get lost in the formula yet. Think about the steps you had to take for it, right?
I think
Kerron?
use VLOOKUPs generally when I'm matching the employee ID to the employee ID to pull in a particular type of information from another sheet. That's how I really use the VLOOKUPs.
Yep.
This one is
the same thing applies, because what we're using is the performance number, right? So it's going over here using the 5, and it's looking for the 5 over here in this table. I'm telling it to go to this table. So I say here what? I need you to use this number I'm giving you, which is the 5. Look in this table, right? Look, when you find the 5 in this table, I want you to grab the description for me and bring it back. And only the description for number 5. So check it. So first is, I'm telling you, look for number 5. That's first. What? What are you looking for? Right? So Rika, listen good, right? The first one is what? What do I want it to look for? That's the first value. The second now is where. Where do you want Excel to look? So I want Excel to look over here. So Natasha, too, it could be in another sheet. It could even be in another workbook, right? Tell it where to go and look. Just like how you'll tell the staff member to go to this cabinet room or wherever the storage room is. Then after you don't tell them what to look for and where to find it. The third thing now, when you find it or if you find it, what do you want Excel to bring back? I want you to bring back the description. In this case, you have to look at the columns. So I want you to bring back whatever you find in the second column of this table that you're looking at. And then finally, I want it to be exactly the description or the value for what I sent you to look for. So only for the 5. But basically, 100% of the time you're going to put 0 here. Because you're only going to do some of the other stuff that we do with lookups. Right? So we're looking for exact match. It must be exact to what I sent you to look for. Right? And I'll just close the bracket, press enter, and I got that. So I'll copy this and drop it in the chat for you all.
Okay, so I understand that, but why are you doing that? I mean, like, is it that you'll just drag and drop so you'll see the description for everything in Performer?
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
The thing is like as we have the employee performance number here, we want the description because what's your usefulness for it, Rika, right?
Mm-hmm.
The usefulness
Right.
is let's say so for every single one we're gonna get the description, right? But what's the value of it here? If it is number 5 now, we decide we changing our rubric. And I come now and I say, this is not exceeds because 4 exceeds. This is super exceeds expectations.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah.
What's going on here?
It changed
See it?
one time. Yeah.
So the lookup will update the reference one time. So you don't have to go fixing all of this. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what it does, it creates a link, a reference point, right, um for what you're looking for. And the same thing applies to the potential, because the potential will be, I want you all to try it because the potential basically is the same function like this. So you're telling the description for potential is you're looking at you wanted to look for the potential number. What would happen if the scores are in decimal? Or what would happen if the scores are in decimal? You would have to look for approximate match. That is the 1 at the end instead of the 0 in it. But what you'll have to do, because that dealing with look up for ranges, that's a whole other story. So you can't look for an exact match there, like I have exact at the end here. Or I have exact at the end, you can't look for exact. You'll have to look for 1, which is like the closest match. And you'll have to make sure like what you're looking for has to be sorted in a particular way. Yeah. We could always talk about that if the way you have your data is like that. I could show you how we could kind of work around it. But for the most part, as I said, like 95% of the time, you're going to be putting 0 here because what you're looking for, you want it to be exact. I don't think you want to look up an employee, some employee descriptor, and you're pulling the descriptor for another employee, right? It has to be exactly for that employee or not at all, right? I don't think you want to do that with people's salary too. You're pulling people's salary into a listing like this using the employee number, and you put the wrong salary for people because you put approximate match. Column B, if widen reads performance grid. This one?
Yes.
No, the performance grid is actually this one here. So this is a table. This table here is actually, the name of this table is performance grid. The one here that has the performance and the description.
Okay, let me see.
Yeah, so you see, Tamika, remember, with this function, I told it where to look. So where is actually looking at the performance grid table here. See it in red? Cool, right?
It's in red, you say?
The performance grid is the table here. This table with the performance and the description.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm looking at the performance field, that's the 5, but I'm looking at the performance grid, which is the table to find it.
Okay.
Yeah. Listen, don't worry. You see when you get these things, you'll be like magic, and you're just running. and a few months from now, you'll be like, But Kerron, what Kerron is doing all that magical? Look, I do this thing every day now. Listen, I am working myself out of an advisory position. Soon I might be the person calling you all and say, hey, I saw what you did, how you did that, and that kind of thing. So guys, I'm gonna leave the potential for you all to play around with. And let's look to take our lunch break. Hey, listen, in my training experience, I have always been, that's my plan. I've always been telling people when I was in training, I'm working myself out of a job. Well, the current job. And because what happens when you teach everybody this level, you work yourself out of that job, and then they're gonna want more to solve a different problem. So you work yourself into another job. And that's how it is work, right? So yep, correct. So I'm gonna leave you all to try that potential one during the lunch break. Try it out, see if you get through with it. It's basically the same formula, the same function as what they did with the performance. And no worries, I will do it as soon as we come back from lunch. But I don't want to overrun the time because we still have some stuff to do. Yeah. Um, and as soon as you get the potential, the talent will pop up. You'll get the talent grid. The lunch, let's pull the lunch back to the same time, So right now it's 12:17. Could you all make it back for one? I think you all could. We could try to keep it back to the schedule. I know I had a little slack time with the lunch, so I was okay with, pushing a little bit on that. But I just want to make sure that we stick back to our schedule and utilize our time wisely, right? So let's come back at 1 p.m. Jamaica time, 2 p.m. Trinidad time. Yeah. And with that, I have a few little things we want to do, and then we want to start our analysis because I want to jump into the pivot table. I want to jump into doing some calculations and show you all that, and then we'll close off with some visuals and how we deal with visuals. Yeah. That's really early. That's the plan for day one. So I think we're still on track. Everything looks good. I'm liking it so far. Don't afraid to send the questions in. And of course, let's break for lunch. And I'll see you all back in about 45 minutes or so, roughly. Yeah. Have a good one, guys. Do have a fulfilling experience. They call it lunch. And I'll see you back in a little bit.
Okay.